Data believes Barclay's performance of Cyrano was adequate. Commander Riker pretends to understand Technobabble, and Captain Picard finally says yes to one of Worf's recommendations. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
You did. I noticed that. Okay.
My name is Ryan T. Huskin. Today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation Season 4, Episode 19, The Nth Degree, written by Joe Menosky, directed by Robert Legato. This was March 30th, 1991. Where were you? Sirach Lofton, what's up? How are you today?
I'm great. I'm doing great. This was a charming episode for me, so it was a joy to sit back and, be entertained, as it were.
Charming. That's the second time I heard the word charming today. The first was when Barclay called Deanna Troi charming. I was like, oh, look at this charmer. That was pretty fun. So we'll get into all of that. Everybody, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon for notifications. If you're listening in, give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. We'd really appreciate that. And go ahead and visit us at patreon.com/the7th-rule to join in all of the good fun. We got crazy perks. I don't know what we're doing, but it's amazing. That's patreon.com/the7th-rule. So, Sirach, it's the return, the triumphant return of Reginald Barclay. How cool is that? Or were you like, oh, this weird guy again?
Yeah, it was like this weird guy again to some degree. Yeah, but I watched A-Team, so
Yes, sir.
I'm always happy to watch. What was it, Murdoch?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
You know
I'm always happy to watch.
That's our
Murdoch
guy.
get his thing up. I thought he did a fantastic job this episode. It was like right away when you see him, because of course I didn't know it was him in the open. It was, he had that long nose and the
I
whole.
wondered about that. I wondered if you could tell who it was. I already knew. Yeah.
Oh, you knew already. Okay, I couldn't recognize. Like, who is this dude? Like, I don't know. This guy looks familiar, kind of, but not really. So I couldn't get it off of the open. And then I started to get clues, of course, when Troy came up and started to say good job and all of these things. I was thinking, this guy is somebody that I have seen before. I must know him. But yeah, it definitely had like a long open. That's another thing I noticed.
Right.
This was, I think it was close to 9 minutes
Yes, it was.
for
Yeah.
the open. Yeah.
I noticed the
And
same.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, I've never seen an opening this long. Usually it's like a good maybe 5 to 7 minutes, 7 tops. This felt like I was like, what is this episode going to ever stop for the credits, or what are we doing? Is this a new format? So I was surprised by that. A 9-minute opening, that's, out of a 45-minute show, that leaves you 36 minutes with the rest of the story. And I thought that's a big chunk to take out of the writing. And it made me wonder if that was done because there wasn't going to be much meat in the story coming forward. And so they figured, hey, let's occupy this time with this performance, and therefore shrinking the amount of stuff that we have to cram into the little bit of time we have left. I thought maybe it was done as a tactic, of a storytelling tactic.
That's a great idea. Great point. And the opposite is probably true as well, which is if you've got the opening and you've got the rest of it, and if the rest of it ends up having too much meat, then you need to, if you got to cut something out, first thing you're going to cut out is that opening. You're going to make it shorter and shorter and shorter.
Right.
And sometimes you have.
So that's an insurance plan, is what you're saying, in case, if you do have a lot of good stuff, then you can cut out of the opening.
It's the first to die, probably. They could have they could have trimmed that out, but maybe I'm wrong. But
it ran long. It ran long. It was one of the longest opens I've seen, and for a long opening like that, without it being you running into like a Romulan warship or a Klingon vessel or some aggressive posturing.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Uh, without some kind of big open like that, where it's like, oh, this is an aggressive stance being did. This they ran into the Borg, for example. I would expect a 9 minute opening with a Borg confrontation, right? Having a 9 minute opening with
For a scene in a play.
yeah, yeah, for a play, yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, okay. I mean, I like it. It's that slice of life stuff that we're talking
Yeah.
about. I like that they take the time in to appreciate the arts, and they take in plays, and they go to the opera, and they watch sword fighting, and they basically have a time to appreciate sports and arts on the ship. That's great. It's like, it's activities. It's fun things to do, and the fact that your fellow crew member are willing to come and support you, and you know politely a clap even when it was not worth the claps. Oh, you're muted.
What's funny is I got the closed captioning on, right? The subtitles, just to make sure I don't miss the alien names like the Cytherians or whatever like that. And it's also
Yeah.
funny to see what the subtitles are. And for that, it said polite applause. I'm like, even the closed captioning dude is throwing shade on him. He's like, it was polite applause. You could have just put applause or people
No,
clapping, but it was like, it was just polite applause. I love that, throwing shade at Barclay. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, it seems like on this ship they like a lot of theater. Like in Deep
yeah,
Space Nine when they go to the holodeck and stuff like that, they like a lot of sports or fighting things or adventure stuff. Next Generation, they like a lot of theater. They like theater performances and musical performances. If you'll notice, that's kind of the two things that they
yeah.
like to
Well,
do.
it's indicative of the interests of the writers.
Yep.
And that's basically what it comes down to. You remember we had a discussion with Ivor where he discussed casting somebody that he had an affinity for based on his performance in Oliver.
Yeah.
He was talking about Clive Revel at the time, but um, so essentially we have a lot of theater buffs that are behind the scenes. They go to watch these performances. They've seen, they probably. Matter of fact, we saw that Patrick Stewart himself was a recommendation based off his performance on stage that somebody had seen, right?
So was Sid, if I remember correctly, Alexander Siddig.
Exactly. So one thing that I know about my compadres, in the business is that they are really attuned to the theater, and that is where the real acclaim comes amongst the peers in acting. So if you want to get the respect of your acting peers, you get it on stage, right? That's where people really kind of take their hat off.
Too true.
That's where you get the real, true, authentic love and respect and admiration from other actors. So our writers are also theater guys. They also go watch shows, and as best they can, they incorporate these kinds of popular culture and theater inferences. You see, Shakespeare is a big thing. Obviously, Shakespeare is a big not only thing for for Picard's character, but also for the writers who are writing that into the character.
Yeah, and they say write what you know, right? So Deep Space Nine, we know that they liked baseball, so they write about baseball. They include baseball or old Vegas mobster kind of stuff, or World War II stuff, right? That's why a lot of writers fall into the trap of writing a story about a writer. they're like,
well,
Jane is a writer, and people are like,
yeah.
okay, we get. Oh,
what?
Let me guess, you're Jane, right?
Yeah, you're Jane. Jane is from your perspective.
So interesting.
No, but I want to add to that. So we also had the Alamo, right?
Yes,
being written for Bashir and O'Brien going to play that out. That was part of the writer's love for the Alamo and the story there, right? The history there. You have other things like Dixon Hill, I think, is probably a reflection of somebody's love for Sherlock Holmes and the detective work. So I think, all of this stuff is incorporated cleverly by the writers who are, not only being obvious about their homage to these things.
Right.
So it's not like it's plagiarism. It's
But
an
again,
homage.
if it's your passion and it's what you know, that's great. Like write what you know. Don't write something
Right.
you don't know anything about, because then you're going to spend hours researching. It's not going to come out authentic. People are going to be able to tell it doesn't come from somebody that actually knows or loves, you know,
Yeah.
the product or whatever it is. So yeah, there's hardly ever a time where they do these slice of life things that isn't somebody's bread and butter, somebody that already knows and loves this thing and can write about it. It's just the way you're supposed to write, and that way it comes out real and authentic, and you know what you're talking about. Kind of like Barclay
Yeah.
here. So,
Well, that was part of the other reason why the Open was so long. They wanted to refresh our memory on Barclay,
yeah,
as well as remind us of personality traits, his self confidence issues, his nervousness, uh, those kinds of things. And I thought that was the basis of that Troy Barkley opening scene where she's saying, "You made so much progress," just letting us know that since the last time we saw him, he's developed, but not that much.
yeah, and it was interesting that we actually got a little serialization where it's not just like, okay, Barkley's back. It's like, let's see how things have progressed for him. And they even said he's been taking the class for 6 weeks. They
Mm-hmm.
say he's kind of improving. Troy's proud of him. There's some kind of progress. There's some kind of, catching up with Barkley. And I remember when I was first watching this back in the day, I really liked Barkley. I was calling him Broccoli.
Yeah.
I really liked Barkley because, he's just this super smart genius guy, obviously, because also I love the A-Team, as you know.
Yeah.
We loved Murdoch too. He was probably, him and B.A. Baracus obviously were the two standouts. And so I really liked the character.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like
That's true.
I like that he was like hyper intelligent and can do all these cool things, kind of gravitate to those kind of characters. But then he acts like a weirdo and you're kind of rooting for him to like overcome that. But I don't know. How do you feel about him overall? Are you kind of uneasy about him or
You
rooting
know
for him?
what? I'm going to say this is what I feel about him. I feel that he's a great actor. His name's Dwight Schultz. And there's some things that he does that I think has been mirrored by other actors who've come after him. Not saying that they're mimicking or copying, but there are certain elements of his performance that I see in other people's performance. And I'm going to give you an example. There's some Kramer from Seinfeld in his performance,
Wow, what a compliment.
right? There's some of
Mhm.
that Kramer, like there's that thing that he does, that Kramer does, that he also has done obviously before Seinfeld ever came on.
Mhm.
But there's this nervous tick, and Kramer does it, and I see that Dwight Schultz is great at it. The other thing, person that he reminds me of is Woody Harrelson's character in Cheers.
Hmm.
It was a slightly, it's like he knows how to play this naivety, and it's so good. It's so authentic. Even when he's like right about things in that way in the beginning, when he's not the genius, but when in the beginning, his normal character, when he feels like he's right about things and he's presenting them, it's still with like, well, I don't know, shucks, like. And I think
Yeah.
there's a little bit of Woody Harrelson is one of the masters of that to me in the Woody Boyd character that he played. He used to play that naivety, sometimes it sounds stupid, but it was smart, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Also, just to kind of jump on about what a great actor Dwight Schultz is, and we already mentioned the A-Team, but it is important to note that the character he played, Murdoch, was completely different. So it's not like he has a shtick. It's not like he's typecastable. It's like he played two completely different characters. And even in this episode, he played two completely different characters.
Yeah.
And the second character wasn't even anything like Murdoch either. So these are three different characters that don't overlap at all. Like Murdoch was nuts and was jokester. I mean, he's definitely a character actor, but you can't typecast him because these are wildly different. So it really shows his range.
Different, with no makeup involved, the same face, but able to like portray a whole different thing. Even when he was plugged into the computer during the second or one, last third of the episode, when he was the computer as himself, that was a third version of the character. That's a third character. So he's playing Dwight. He's playing the original, Barclay, right? Then he goes from Barclay to the genius Barclay, and then he goes into psychopath.
Yeah, Marvel supervillain, right?
Yes, Marvel supervillain mode. Exactly. So he's playing three characters in this episode, in my opinion. The performance that he's giving are three distinctly different characteristic traits of the character, where you can't recognize the other one when you see this one. And I think that's a remarkable talent that he had on display in this episode. I was sit back watching the performance. He's just good to watch, like he was on the A-Team. He is fun to watch as an actor. He's playful. He's engaging. He gets the contextual elements of what the script is trying to convey across. He's just, I have a whole new respect for Mr. Dwight Schultz.
Nice. Did you think for a second that Deanna Troi was going to say, okay, I'll go for a walk with you? Or do you think, nope, no chance?
I thought that right away, actually, because in the beginning when she came up to him and she said, "You did a very good job," and he's like, "You really think so?" And I thought she liked him.
Yeah.
There was a chemistry there where she was kind of saying, I was like, "Uh-oh, is this like an episode where?" That's what I was thinking. I was like, "Is this episode where Troy finally gets some?"
Because, and Riker loses his shit. Riker just like, no.
Well, Riker did lose his shit a little bit in this episode. He's like, so, he said something about,
you didn't tell us whether it was a successful pass. And then she just kind of like smirks a little bit. And Beverly kind of smirks, and he's just kind of like, what? Like, you didn't think it was funny at all.
Exactly. He got into Rage Riker mode, and don't set that guy up. And I was thinking, oh, poor Barclay, he's gonna have the full weight of Riker on him if he goes out on a date with Troy. You know what I mean? And that's what I kind of thought this episode was leading up to in the beginning. Yeah, because she did flirt with him to some degree in that moment. There was a look she gave him, like, I'm impressed with your development, and your development is something that I'm attracted to. I thought that's what I felt.
Here's Rage Riker, kind of.
That's right. That would have been Riker like day 3 of them dating.
Yeah, stay tuned for that episode. That's one of the best episodes ever, called Parallels, but season 7, so it'll be a while. Anyway, yeah, it's always fun. I've noticed that now that they've established what kind of character Riker is, what kind of character Picard is, what kind of character Data and them are, now they can poke fun at them. Because you can't really poke fun until the audience thinks, oh, that's such a Data thing to do. Oh, that's just Riker being Riker. Because now, when Riker being Riker is faced with something that pulls him out of that element, now it's funny. Now we're like, oh, Riker, the shoe's on the other foot all of a sudden, or ooh, Picard's not very comfortable with this thing that's happening, So that's when we can really feel their pain and enjoy watching them squirm, because now they've fully fleshed out these characters. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. And I want to go back a little bit to that opening scene again. I know it's a lot, but Data makes the face like he smells something. It's hilarious when he's sitting there in the theater and he's looking around like with that smirk, like the hell's cool. Like
That
he
was so
does this.
funny.
Like, does anybody else smell that? And I thought that was hilarious. I thought it was great. A little out of his character because you're like, why would he be so concerned
Yeah.
emotionally? But
He would just be like,
but yeah,
peculiar.
but yeah, but he was like, this sucks. How come no one else thinks?
He's like, am I being gaslit right now, guys? Come on, what are you guys clapping for? You guys, this sucks. You're not supposed to clap. It sucks. You're supposed to just go like,
Worf gave another disgruntled look too. He was like, he gave a look over at Geordi. Like, I just some of those looks and moments I enjoyed. I really did.
He did. Like when Geordi started clapping and Worf was like, are you serious? Okay. Fine. Then they exchanged a look before that too. Yeah, that was a funny scene all around, just kind of showing all their reactions. And of course, Beverly and Troy and Picard and Riker were trying to be supportive. Well, not Beverly. Who was it? Yeah, I guess it was Riker. It was Riker and Troy.
But Beverly was being supported on stage. She was giving him the lines, at some point or another.
Yeah, but those two, Riker and Troy, that's what it was. The cutaway where they're like super nice and cool, and Data was like perplexed, and then it was Geordi and Worf that were kind of looking at each other like, I just don't even know. But anyway, so stay tuned. Maybe there's more Barclay in future episodes.
I would love it.
Maybe even a movie.
I don't know, but I do enjoy watching him. Like I said, I've been watching him. I've been a fan of his. When he pops up, he gives you all of himself when he's in the character. It's like he's not cheating you, or cheating the audience. He's giving you all of himself in that role, and it's believable. It's genuine and it's believable.
Yeah, he was trying to give all of himself to Deanna. And by the way, we've had Star Trek Picard. Let's make Star Trek Barclay happen, everybody. Star Trek Barclay, the series that everybody's wanted for a long, long time. But there were a lot of funny moments in this. This was, not a ton of like hilarious slapstick kind of stuff, but I was laughing throughout. I was having a great time, giggling and enjoying myself. For example, just at the very beginning, when Barclay forgets his line, and you're just like, she goes, let it go. And he says, what? I'm like, dude, you don't remember your line. And when she gives it to you, you're still not getting, I was like, what a catastrophe. He's like, what? And she goes, let it go. And he's like, oh yes, let it go. I'm like, oh, this is just horrendous stuff. But I don't know, maybe we should just take our break and collect ourselves. Because we also had an ensign of the week, or ensign helms person of the week. Again, we always have that now. Ever since Wesley's been gone, we always have that. Also, we got a Tracy Coco sighting. I finally saw it. I keep missing it, but I finally caught one. Lots to talk about. Let's get into that on the other side.
Yeah.
Everybody stick around.
I also want to add quickly that Dr. Crusher looks super beautiful in this episode as well. Those facial close-ups when she's on stage doing the performance, I thought she looked gorgeous. Even when she was emotionally touched towards the end, she looked really beautiful on screen. Just have to shout that out.
Agreed.
Shout out.
Agreed there all the way. All right, everybody. Now that Picard is successfully rendered jealous by Serac, we're going to take our break, and we'll be right back on the Seventh Rule. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Seventh Rule with Serac, the game changer Lofton.
Hello.
What's the game? It's all about the game and how you play it. Okay. So where were we? Oh, here we go. We've got some trivioids of the week. Here they are in no particular order, actually probably chronological. Data believes Barclay's performance of Cyrano was adequate. Reginald Barclay has been taking Beverly's theater workshop for 6 weeks. The Enterprise has arrived at the Argus Array. Geordi doesn't think a probe is from their neighborhood. Captain Picard finally says yes to one of Worf's recommendations. Commander Riker pretends to understand technobabble. What Reginald Barclay needs is the company of a charming, intelligent woman. And the Cytherians are exploring the galaxy by bringing others to them. Kind of like similar to the founders in Odo, how they kind of send, they would send them out. A little different though.
Yeah.
So Worf finally gets a yes. Like I was expecting him to get another no, as he always does when they're like, what do we do? And Worf goes, Captain, recommend we fire phasers. And I'm thinking he's just gonna be like, no, Mr. Wolf, shut the fuck up for once. But no, this time he's like, yes, do it. And I was like, whoa, are you drunk, Picard? What is going on? Too much NyQuil, bro. That was nice to see.
He was just desperate. He finally, somebody was smarter than Data for the first time in like ever.
Next thing you know, somebody's going to appear on the bridge and Worf won't get knocked out by that person.
Yeah, he'll actually win the fight. Man, Worf and his frustration, speaking of Worf, when he is on that phaser, he calls for that phaser fire. Of course, Picard says, yes, do it. And he does it. When he's doing it and kind of pressing the buttons and looking up at the screen, he acts out these frustration face because it's not working, right? So he's like, and watching him do that made me really see how much he was committed as this character, right? Because, I mean, it's almost comical at some point, but, looking into a blank screen, pretending to fire a phaser and being really mad when it doesn't hit, you know what I mean? Wearing all that makeup. You really got to be committed to get into there, because for me, I started to laugh when I'm watching his face, just kind of like act out these frustrations. He's so good.
He's so pouty and fussy. That's why he needs prune juice. But this is like one of the other lines that he did that cracked me up. Another Worf moment was when Geordi says, we can talk. When he unplugged like the audio systems in the conference room, he says, we can talk without being monitored by the computer. And Worf goes, by Barclay. Like, yes, Worf, yes, by Barclay, we get it. But he's like pissed at Barclay. He's like, no, it's not the computer. It's that freaking asshole Barclay. Don't let him off the hook. It's Barclay. So that was another funny moment, I thought.
Yeah. He acts out his frustrations that I wrote down. That's what I basically wrote down. And it's hilarious to see. Another thing, I want to go double back on Dwight Schultz. The guy's technobabble scene with Riker walking down the hallway was one of the highest degree of difficulty that I've ever seen. It's one of the...
I think so too. That might have been number one. And then Riker cracks us up by pretending he goes, that makes it. Yeah. Totally.
Oh, yeah, I see that. I see that. I could see that. I actually had to write it down and rewind it. It was that good. I was like, and then it made me think he's holding that pad, and I'm wondering, did he had to have just put the words down on that pad in front of him. I would have.
Because that's crazy.
There's no way.
If it takes 19, if it takes 19 takes to say self-sealing stem bolt, they don't have the time for this one.
No. and I don't care if you're the greatest actor of all time. It's just impossible to say stuff that your brain, unless you're Stephen Hawking and like how this really works, and it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense to you. You know what I mean? If you're Carl Sagan, you could probably say these words really easily, and it won't be difficult for you. But the rest of us normal people with regular brains, let me just read out what his line was. He says, he's like, how did you, all of us want to know how you figured that out. That's Riker's setup line. And he says, Barclay says, well, it just occurred to me that I could set up a frequency harmonic between the deflector and the shield grid using the warp field generator as a power flow anti-actuator. And that, of course, created an amplification of the inherent energy output. I mean,
it's an actuator.
Reading it is hard to do, right? It's actually hard to just even read it. So to memorize it is like, you got to be really great. So, it was just another impressive thing for me by Dwight's performance, because he also checked the technobabble box to me at one of the highest degree of difficulty and saying it very casually and leisurely, as if it's second nature to him. So whether he was reading it or not, the performance, the delivery was accurate and high degree of difficulty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought of that too. That was just maybe the craziest line we've ever seen or heard. Maybe there'll be more. Maybe we'll have Barclay back to say more weird shit like that. But there were other good moments. Oh, Tracy Coco. Okay. So I finally saw her, because sometimes people say in the free for all, hey, we saw Tracy Coco. And I'm like, dude, I missed her. This time she was talking to Worf and she gave a couple nods, in the back. She's like, oh, okay, okay. And then we saw her again later on with somebody named like Borland or something like that. Shout out to Wes Borland, who was the guitarist of Limp Bizkit, if I remember correctly. You'd have red contact lenses, I think. Anyway, so she was something like Borland or Borley or something like that. So she was back there, at least in a couple scenes I saw her. So shout out to Tracy Coco for that.
Yeah. Riker had a limp biscuit when he found out his girl was being Mac.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
So, and then here are the funny moments for me, besides those. When Beverly says, I think you better stick to engineering. I was like, damn, even Beverly's kind of picking on this guy. Like, I mean, he deserved it a little bit, but she could have just been like, oh, that's nice. Thanks, Barclay. I'll look into it. But she was like, look, bro, I saw your performance. Don't try to tell me anything about anything. Also, when Worf was very reticent, it showed all over his face constantly. And when Barclay first saved him, and Picard goes, "Thank you, Mr. Barclay." Like, he's just kind of like, okay, I guess whatever that. I don't get it. What else? There was just so many moments I had to write them down. When Barclay says you're a very forgiving audience to Troy, he's being it's cute.
I thought that, again, we saw a meeting of the crew kind of coming together for problem solving. Again, love those type of things when they get together and they say, hey, okay, boom, boom, boom. I don't know. What'd you see? Oh, well, he kind of flirted with me. What about you? I like when they have these meeting of the minds. They can do that once an episode for me. And it lets me know that that's how Picard keeps his crew on the same page and everybody's kind of, in an alliance together.
Absolutely. That's the best thing about Star Trek The Next Generation, is seeing them all working together like that, respecting each other, throwing ideas out, and really showing their expertise in their field and being respected for it. Love that. Yes. Oh, we saw Dennis Madalone too.
I didn't see Dennis Madalone.
He walked in with Worf when they tried to stop Barclay. He was the guy that went up against the force field and bounced back.
Oh, okay.
You only see him for like a second, but it's so funny. It's like, now when I see him walk in, I immediately know, okay, something's going to happen. Someone's going to fall.
I didn't even pay attention to the two guys that were with Worf.
He was behind him. That's why it was kind of tough to see.
Yeah.
But then I was like, I think that's Dennis. I was like, something's going to happen. Of course, Dennis is the guy who walks right up and every time it's going to be him. Something's going to happen.
Every time I see the Enterprise go in reverse, I don't know, something kicks in my head about it. It's just like it's I don't know why, but my brain is like, this thing can go backwards too. I don't know why I think that, because I'm always thinking it's like a ship, so it can only go forward, right? So when it goes backwards, it kind of boggles my brain a little bit, to be honest with you. Aren't the thrusters and propellant system in one side behind it?
Yeah, but I think like that's for warp. Like they can only warp in one direction. But I guess they're regular thrusters. Okay, so I'm looking up the Ensign Helmsperson of the week, and it was Ensign April Anaya. And I'm looking because I always want to see, do we ever see her again, or is this a one-off? Like every week we have somebody new. Every once in a while we get somebody for 2 episodes in a row. And yet again, it's a one-timer. So Ensign, April, and Naya, thank you for hanging out with us. We appreciate you, and see you never, basically. The other one was Lieutenant Linda Larson. It's kind of rare, like maybe only half the time they give these characters a character name, right? Like, for example, Tracy Coco, she's still not called Jay. Only one time way later on, she's mentioned to be Jay, I think, and that's how she got that name. But right now we just see her in the background. They don't call her anything. Now, Larson had a couple lines, and I was wondering, she had a few lines. She even gave Barclay like a little head shake, like, oh boy, that guy screwed up. So I'm wondering if she was in more episodes. Like, are they trying to introduce her as an actual character, right? So that's what her name is, Saxon Trainer, which is an interesting name. Saxon Trainer. She's been in a ton of stuff. I just want to see if she's going to be in any more episodes. No. 1 episode. That's it. Goodbye. Thank you for saying those lines. We gave you a character name. We introduced you. We gave you some scenes. And I wish they would bring these people back so we could kind of recognize them. Even just a few times would be great.
Or give us an explanation on why that is. So, you know what? This is a transfer ship. So this is where a lot of our personnel comes to transfer over to other ships. So we have a rotating crew that you'll never see again.
Yeah, the USS Revolving Door. Yeah.
The revolver. Yeah. I want to say that I really like LaForge in the scene where he was I actually liked him in this episode in general. I thought he was really good. LeVar Burton, I thought, played the tone right. He was considerate. He kind of took the backseat at certain moments when he realized he was being outsmarted in certain cases. I just thought he played it well. His suspicion was accurate, and his solution for the problem, I thought, was great. And I also like the conversation scene where he's kind of crawling through the tunneling and trying to get to the conduit. And he's having that conversation with Barclay. I enjoyed that conversation between the two of them. I felt it was a game of a verbal chess game. And I was like, I really respect Geordi's intelligence, because even though this dude is smarter than him, and by probably 500% or whatever the number is, right? He's still kind of outsmarting him, while talking to him. So while he's talking to Barclay, he's actually working on the plan to, go around him and bypass him.
Yeah.
So I thought that in itself lets me know that Geordi has a high level of intelligence, right? He's able to engage in a conversation with this supremely mentally competent being now merged with the computer and have, whatever the IQ number is. And yet he's still confident that he's able to deceive Barclay enough while he's accomplishing his mission. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I also thought it was just cool because the way LeVar delivers it, and I don't know if this is how it read, but he also shows a little bit of concern for his friend. Like, he's curious, what are you going through? What's going on? Like, he's trying to distract him. He's trying to get a little bit more information, but he also is like, hey, what's going on? How are you feeling? Talk to me. And I really like that, because it feels like then Geordi is conflicted, and he has a lot of things that he's working on at the same time. He's trying to save the ship. He's trying to deceive his friend. He's trying to help his friend. There's just kind of a lot going on there. And, that was my favorite scene for Geordi. I really liked it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that leads me to the writing. Joe Menosky, this is his 3rd Next Generation episode. And I really enjoy this. His name is solo credited on this, so it doesn't look like there's a story by or teleplay. So this is all Joe. And Joe, as I look back upon his history, I never really got a chance to meet him or have a conversation with him. But he did that show called Hunter, and
What?
he wrote about like 8 episodes for Hunter. Do you remember that show, Hunter?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I remember Hunter. I remember my uncle really liked that show. And I always
I
looked at
liked it too.
I remember like Hunter, there was like a period of time where there were a bunch of those shows. There was like Hunter, Remington Steele, where it's just like a
Yeah,
guy in a gun going and saving stuff. I never saw it though,
yeah,
but I can picture the
yeah. I did.
guy.
Yeah. I watch Hunter all the time. There's some ways that people portray characters that are endearing and you really root for them. It's the same thing, like for example, Mel Gibson and Die Hard and different characters like that. You really like the way they played the character, And I thought the way Hunter was played was kind of like Craig T. Nelson would play Coach. There was a likability
Really
factor there
nice.
to this guy. Yeah. So he wrote for Hunter. You can see some of the influences of his writing in this episode. The way the story unfolds, the way the pace is, the way it plays out. I think it's a good script and a good story because it also takes certain elements of other things that I've seen in other popular culture, right? Other shows.
Yeah, and Joe Menosky is like, we've kind of touched on it before, but on top of Hunter and Alien Nation, all these other things, he wrote for 35 episodes of The Next Generation, 4 episodes of Deep Space Nine, and 36 episodes of Voyager, as well as 1 episode of Discovery, an episode of The Orville, and a few episodes of For All Mankind. So this guy has his hand in everything. He's
Right.
he's still working. I mean, good for
Yeah.
him. Really great stuff there.
Yeah, and so clearly he's in with Brandon Braga, he's in with Ron Moore, he's
Yep.
been in with Michael Piller,
He's a co-EP on Discovery, on Orville, and For All Mankind.
I mean, so he's been in there the whole time. I haven't got a chance to meet him and talk to him, but clearly the guy knows how to write. I felt like this episode was well written. It hit all the characters. It used all the characters, even though it had a guest star in it. It
Right.
still used all the characters well because I got Worf screen time. I got Geordi a lot of screen time. Troy had some good moments there, I thought, where she was relatable and obviously concerned about him when she approaches. Um, so a lot of the characters got opportunity. Beverly had a great opportunity to do the acting scene and also, use her doctor knowledge to try to figure out
Yeah,
how to fix.
that's a great
So
point because it was a Barclay episode, like you say, but all
yeah,
7 main characters, it feels like they all got good moments. Like nobody felt
yes,
like they were kind of relegated to the background or just reacting. Like they all had their moments. They all were within their character. They all had their moment to shine. They all had their close-ups. Yeah, that's a good point. Everybody got utilized and everybody got to eat in this episode, basically, right?
that's what I mean. And so that goes to Joe's understanding of the characters, giving them all something to do. Um, that's within their realm of defined personality traits. So it makes sense that Warp is like that. It makes sense that Data is like this. It makes sense that all these characters behaved in a certain way. Troy, for example, this might have been one of the best examples of Troy as a counselor actually counseling somebody and seeing the development of invested counseling in a person, right? So like the fruit of her labor over time is what I mean. Like, so
Yeah.
we actually see her counseling skills, and her, kind of approaching this character in a with the tender gloves on. So I just think that there's a lot of things that was well done in this episode. Scientifically, it made sense. We saw the merger of this character and the computer. That's like basically something that we're headed towards as far as technology.
Yeah, that's true. And like
We're
when the
looking at
computer says, we don't know how to build that thing, he said, don't worry, I'll walk you through it. He's like, let me
yes,
show you. I was like, oh, this guy, he's going to teach the computer
yes,
how to do something. This is great. Well,
yeah.
we're almost out of time here. So let's get to the home run The TNG home run of the episode.
Yeah. It's a three-headed monster for me on this particular episode, and that's one going to be Joe Manoski in the writing. It was very good. Number two is the star of this episode was Dwight Schultz as the guest actor, just just nailing it on all metrics and having great moments with a lot of the cast.
This third one's the wild card for me. This is the one I can't guess.
The third one is going to be, without a doubt, Robert Legato, the director of this episode. He did some really good stuff, a lot of sweeping motions, where he would start on defeat and move his way up, start on the glass, move his way up, a lot of movement on the camera. He would have people walking into two shots, like he did with the opening scene of Cyrano. He also had some great lighting effects. There was the lighting for the stage for when they're doing the performance. There was a lighting effect for the Barclay when he became the computer, and he had all these lights attached to him in that particular room. Looked real neon and Tron looking, So, and then he also had a visual effect of distortion when they were going through this anomaly.
That was great. Yes, I agree. That was great.
And I mean, I was like, why don't they use this more often? Because this looks sci-fi to me. That distortion looks sci-fi to me, and I'm thinking, well, how long did it take for somebody to bust that out? And Robert did it this episode, so that's why he's also going to be the third head on the three-headed monster.
That was a great effect. I agree, and that's the first time they've used it. And yeah, what a pro! I agree with you. Like, he's a smart guy, right? Like you said, start with the feet and work your way up. That's how the pros do it. Okay, so it's just a piece of advice, just good words of wisdom there. Home run of the episode for me, I'm just going to keep it simple and say Dwight Schultz. Although I completely agree with you with the director and the writing. I'm glad you pointed that out. But Dwight Schultz, he nailed it. He was great. He hit at all the beats. He was intimidating at some points, and he was pitiable in other points. And he was funny in some points, and he was annoying at other points. And he did everything you want in a guest star. And so A+ to him, home run to him. Here are some cool people. You might have it memorized by now, everybody. Check it out. Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackman-Tom, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Titus Muller, Dr. Muhammad Noor, Tierney C. Diekman, Anil O. Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu, and Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, My Live from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manasfi, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Tim Baum, Chris Sternett, Peter Draymore, Chris Garris, and of course, Jason Oken and Greg K. Wickstrom. That's it for us, everybody. It's time for the free-for-all. Some of those names we just mentioned will be in the free-for-all, and here they come now. We'll be right back on the seventh rule.
I'll forget about it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the seventh rule. Melissa's been doing potty humor on the break with Melissa Longo, of course. Chris Garris is also here. There he is.
Hello.
Carrie Schwent is like in church or something. Chris McGee is in his dark lair. Greg Kenzo hanging out with Einstein where he belongs. TJ Jackson Bay has got his umbrellas, of course. And the Matt Boardman with his awesome Ferengi family shirt. All right. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
I got this at an 8.2.
8.2. Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know?
I'm going to go 8.4.
Yeah. But this is like classic sci-fi. 8.
I'll go 7.6.
All bets are in. The answer, of course, everybody knows, is 7.9. Very close. Very close. You guys were circling the
Almost an
wagons there.
Yeah.
Were there any non-appearance mentions? I didn't catch any.
Mm-mm.
All right. Chris McGee, what about some kinds of... This feels like an episode that was ripe for some sort of...
Does seem like it. We got one spoken by Riker upon first seeing that probe on the monitor. Said, "That's some kind of probe. I'll bet it's what's damage to the array."
Yeah.
I don't know why that was
He
funny.
says that a lot.
Yeah. I just thought it was funny that he's like, upon seeing the probe, he says, "That's some kind of probe."
Yep.
All right. Melissa Longo, can you please get us started off on the right track and let us know what you think of this episode? Cool shirt, by the way. Nice color.
Thank you. It's a J. I enjoyed this episode for several reasons. I like that it is a very sci-fi-esque episode. I love the idea of that giant telescope. I was blown away by that. And the acting, gosh, I love this show because the actors on this show are just phenomenal. I love Beverly Crusher. I love Beverly Crusher. I could watch her all the time. And I could. And I enjoyed Troy in this as well. And what I love about them is because their facial expressions come from a place of honesty. There's no forehead tension. As an acting teacher often pointed out to us while we were in class, you have forehead tension, you have forehead tension, you have forehead tension, which belies the scene, or the truth that you're supposed to be speaking in the scene. Anyway, but I also like how Star Trek, and this episode does this very well, how Star Trek explores the idea of, or the threat of humanity losing its freedom, i.e. freedom of choice. And they used Barclay in this to express this kind of topic or, subject matter, in that he took over the computer, much like 2001: A Space Odyssey. I got those vibes a lot, and how the computer, and I got that a lot. So so they used Barclay to express that loss of freedom, that loss of choice, and I just really enjoyed this episode all the way around.
Awesome. Barclay appreciates that. Thank you very much, Melissa Longo. Chris Garris is here in South Texas. I mean, the proverbial here. What do you think of this one?
I've always liked this episode. And anytime you have Barclay episodes, it's going to be a fun one. The poor guy is always going to have something happen to him. He's going to have a transporter slug, or now get taken over by a computer. And I always like the character, obviously, Dwight Schultz, because he plays Barclay kind of the same way as he did Murdoch in the old A-Team series, because they were all kind of kooky and had hallucinations and whatnot. And then I like how the episode, as it goes through, and he's starting to get, his powers and stuff, he actually becomes, as it's kind of funny, he gets that ladies' man action going on when he's kind of, when he has the, he makes a pass at Troy. And then he's got, Dr. Crusher almost weeping when he's doing that scene. And she's just like, oh my God, and she just can't take it. And then, like Melissa was saying, he did lose control of what he was doing. And I was having I was trying to think about that. Was he really under control, or was the aliens do it, and they made him bring them to their race? And so, and I felt bad because, he's always trying to be better, take care of himself, and get past all of his quirks and whatnot. And then and then he has this, and then he loses it. But in the end, it was a great episode. And I did like the one little smirk. And you knew it was going to go bad in a way when Dr. Crusher told him he's probably the smartest the most advanced human being that's ever lived. And he's got that little bitty smirk on his face, like, yes, I am. So yeah, it was a good episode. And I just like how they ended it. You know, they exchanged their information, and you know, it was a fun one to watch.
Oh, you're mute.
Thank you very much, Chris Garris. Good stuff there. Yeah, that smirk was kind of cool when she said, "Oh, you're the most advanced," and he was just kind of like, "Yeah, that tracks." Carrie Schwent is here, second most advanced human, neck and neck though. What do you think of this one?
I very much love this episode. I love Barclay. He was sort of my Tilly before we got Tilly on Discovery. She's got the same kind of vibe that I love about Barclay. I did some looking, and the script apparently was written as an homage to Flowers for Algernon, which I've never read, but the whole episode sort of reminded me. There's a John Travolta movie called Phenomenon, where he has sort of a similar experience. He sees the flashlight and he slowly gets smarter and smarter as the course of the movie goes on. Sadly, that movie ends a little much sadder than this episode does, but Barclay maybe gets to keep a little bit of it. The array looked really cool, and I don't know if about anybody else, but the probe looked like a giant water heater tank floating out in space. It was almost the same shape. Now, I've never seen a production of Cyrano, but it's on my list. I'd love to see it someday. The set for Cyrano was cool. I've got a huge thing for stained glass, so as soon as I saw the stained glass in the back of that set, I knew exactly what my background was going to look like. This one is in a chapel on the Colorado College campus in Colorado Springs. Eric's favorite part is the chair appearing in the holodeck when Barclay walks in and says, "I need a chair," and it's appearing as he's turning to sit down on it. Now, if the chair hadn't appeared that quick, he would have hit the floor. I loved the floating head guy at the end. He was adorable. Kind of made me think of if Gandalf was a hippie. That sort of vibe with like the little braids and things. But the actor, we've seen him before. He was in the DS9 episode, The Storyteller. You know, the village is strong. He was the first storyteller in that episode. I looked it up, saw the picture just immediately. The face acting is absolutely hysterical. Data watching Cyrano, his face just made me laugh so much. It's kind of what my face, I think, looked like. And apologies to anybody who has seen the Book of Mormon and liked it. But Data's face was what my face looked like the whole second half of that particular musical. In contrast, Beverly's face with the tears in that is what my face looks like when every single time I watch Phantom of the Opera. You think of the night, especially. By the end of that song is like Beverly at the end of Barclay's monologue. And yeah, Barclay is Dwight. It just hits it out of the park, and he gets to play so many different shades throughout the entire episode, and none of it feels over the top. I thought, especially the scenes with him and Troy. She's sweet with him. She is incredibly tempted by his past, and you can tell she thought about it for half a second about saying yes. And the face acting there was good. Riker, when she mentions the past later, that quick snap, like, wait a minute, he did what? And her laughing at Riker's reaction, yeah, that whole bit about the past was hysterical. Where was it? And to introduce the limerick, Troy was right about that. It takes confidence to put yourself out there and do that sort of stuff, like what Barclay was doing with the acting. I felt like, and I felt a lot like Barclay. I acknowledge that because doing this, doing the limericks, doing karaoke for the first time, you can get through it, but you can also at the same time be absolutely terrified while you're doing it. It's not an easy thing to do, but you guys are all awesome, and I love how supportive you all are. I want to acknowledge that while I'm saying that. And to finish, I will naturally Barclay is the subject of this week's limerick. Something is happening. My mind expands. Should I ask Counselor Troy for a dance? I can save the array, but I must do it my way. Now the Enterprise obeys my commands.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also
Barclay,
Lieutenant J sighting in the episode.
right. Barclay did it his way. Thanks very much, Carrie Schwent. All right, Chris McGee, cool isolinear chip shirt. What do you think of this episode, though?
Oh, this episode is a great follow-up to Hollow Pursuits. I think I already mentioned during that earlier review how relatable Barclay is to those of us who were socially awkward, stuttering teenagers at the time, and who may still be socially awkward, stuttering middle-agers now. Anyway, this episode gives us a wish fulfillment story because, after all, who among us wouldn't love to be more confident, charming, creative, and probably other adjectives that begin with C? This episode marks our first visit to the Argus Array. As we'll eventually discover later in the series, an alien probe is only the beginning of this telescope's problems. The actors in this episode, Dwight Schultz does an incredible job, especially with the techno babble in this episode, especially when he explains how he increased the shield strength to Riker. And I love that Riker pretends to understand anything he just said. Carrie had mentioned the Cytherian alien at the end, seen behind Melissa, who was played by, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing his name, K.E. Cuter, I believe, along with his unique voice. Besides the DS9 episode that he goes on to appear in, he's been in a ton of films and voiced many video game characters, and I always enjoy seeing him. Melissa had mentioned Isaac Asimov's 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it might be unintentional, but when Picard asks Barclay on the holodeck to remove himself from the computer, I think Barclay's line, "I'm afraid I can't do that, sir," is an homage to HAL 9000.
He sounds exactly like him, too.
Exactly.
Wow.
Which is why I thought it. Sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt. But
No, it's quite all right. One more thing before the memorable quote is, I don't know about anyone else, but I want to go dance at Barclay's neural interface disco, man. That looks like a wild place. Some interesting, unique, and memorable quotes. The one I've chosen is the one that I would love to be able to use someday, and that is, what I need is the company of a charming, intelligent woman.
Yep. Great stuff. Thank you very much, Chris Dark Lord McGee. All right. Speaking of charming, Greg Kenzo is out in Hawaii, the charm capital of the world. What do you think of this episode?
I thought it was great. Like classic sci-fi. I loved how, in the beginning, Chris mentioned it. Chris McGee just mentioned it, how they set him up from the last episode he was in Hollow Pursuits. And, when I was like 14, 15, I went through like a shy phase. So, this really his character really resonates. I never had a stutter, but, I like how they approach it, because that's what this was. It was really a Barclay episode, and Barclay's main thing is getting over his own insecurities and getting out of his head to help whoever he cares about, and showing that, shy people have a lot to offer. They go more into it in Voyager. He gets a lot more screen time in Voyager than, compared to TNG, he has about the same. Anyway, I like how they established Geordi and Barclay's relationship. How he serves less when he's with friends. How, but there are a few things that I just didn't like about this episode. That they didn't take advantage of his intelligence, his inspiration, and his creativity while they had a chance. They're explorers, you know what I mean? Like this scene behind me, I'm going to do what Carrie did. Go like that. When they were talking about Albert Einstein's grand unification theory, and like Barclay, like write something down, you know what I mean? Like, keep a record of it, But that's okay. That's a nitpick. That kid, there were a lot of plot holes, but ultimately this was a great sci-fi adventure. It really was. It was, but I'll save the other thing I have for things left unsaid. It was great.
Ooh, tease. Thanks very much, Greg Kenzo out in Hawaii. TJ Jackson Bay hanging out on the bridge of the Enterprise D. What did you think of this episode? Do you love Barclay or what?
He's always fun to watch, that's for sure. And boy, did he take us on a journey in this one. A journey that caught my attention. In the teaser scene, when he's in the play and he's nervous, after that he's talking to Troy, and then he says something that really caught my attention right from the beginning. He said, "I just feel more comfortable playing somebody else." And that grabbed my attention because I think at some point I know I felt that way. It felt more comfortable to try to be someone else than to just be myself. And people are always saying, "Oh, just be yourself, just be yourself," and that felt harder than trying to be someone else. So I identified with that line when he said it. And then later on, after the probe is working on him, and he and Geordi are talking in the corridor, and Geordi's concerned, he says, "But I've finally become the person I've always wanted to be." And so, that's a step away from where he was at the beginning of the episode. And of course, how we've known him to be in Hollow Pursuits. So he feels the confidence, and he knows that something has happened to him, and Geordi knows it too, and he just kind of wants to let it go because he feels like he's living his dream finally. And then towards the end, again, Troy and Geordi are having a conversation after he's been restored into his body and has done all of this stuff. And he just says, well, I think Geordi says, "Oh, just plain old Barclay again." And he says, "Yeah, it always seems to just come back to that." And so you can almost see him starting to slide into this kind of depression about it. But, Geordi, being his friend, just kind of comforts him and tells him, "Hey, everybody," I think both of them had some kind of lines in this encouragement, but they say, everybody kind of has this moment of excitement in their life. And basically, I mean, they didn't say the words, but after that, you either crash and burn or you live. And so, they're encouraging him to, okay, just, savor the fact that happened and you lived the dream, and go on with your life. You don't, spend the rest of your life chasing that moment that's past. And I identify with that a lot too. I think it's easy to get lost in the past. And if you're living in the past, you're not living in the present. A couple of side points to mention, aside from the Barclay journey, the Argus Array, and I don't know if this was mentioned earlier, the Argus Array is a space telescope, and this episode was filmed or released in 1991, 1 year after the Hubble Space Telescope was launched into space. So, I thought that was a neat way for Star Trek to kind of keep up with what's happening in the real world at that time. Now we have the James Webb Space Telescope up there. It's not quite as big as the Argus Array, but it's allowing scientists to see further and different things than they've ever been able to see. So I thought that was an interesting, progression. Also, in the second theater scene, the one with Beverly, tearing up because Barclay's just blowing her away. She's wearing this amazing blue sweater, and I love it. And I really, really hope that she wears it the next episode. I'll say more later.
comment.
Yeah, man. We'll see what happens. I mean, maybe if we're very, very lucky. All right,
Yeah.
the Matt Boardman, what is up? Any predictions for next episode, and what do you think of this one?
Well, I will say that for the next episode, I am not a merry man.
Nice.
Will you say that under protest, though?
I say it under protest. Exactly. I love this episode. So this image behind me is not actually from the episode. That's some artwork that I did.
Nice.
That I tried to pitch as a proposal for the Ships of the Line calendar because I love this episode so much. One of the things I really enjoy about Star Trek is when they bring in a guest actor, they do such a great job of integrating and having everybody interact. It's like, as we listen to the reviews that Walter does and he talks about how, guests come in and everything. I can only imagine coming in as a guest actor to an established cast, especially one in the fourth season of a show. And yeah, I mean, obviously they did one the previous season with Dwight Schultz, but I can imagine that would be kind of intimidating. But I always kind of feel like, especially with the next gen cast, I actually with all of them, it's just like they just bring them in and they welcome them. And like Dwight Schultz, I love when we get to see him as Barclay because, yeah, he's quirky and he's different, right? He's not like your typical, I would say military officer. But that doesn't matter, because he brings something to the table, and after that initial bumpy introduction, it's like that he's going to bring something to it. Like, okay, he may not be able to spit out what he wants to say as easily as anybody else, but he is smart, and so I love that we got a story that that this alien race, after trying all of these mechanical things, saw him and went, hey, that's where we're going to go, because they saw some value in him as I guess an individual. And I don't know, it just makes for a really, really cool episode. And I mean, everybody's described some of their favorite parts. I don't know why this is so fit. I like this part so much because maybe it's just the deadpan way that he says it. But when he goes in to tell the computer, I want you to make me this chair, and the computer is like, I got nothing for you, bro. And he's like, not a problem. I'll tell you how. He's just like, I like the idea of other races out there that explore. And okay, so maybe they are not in a position where they can go out and explore like Starfleet can. So they have a different way of bringing people in and making those cultural connections. And this is one that I've always wished that we got to revisit in some form or another, just to see what came from that knowledge exchange between the Federation and the Cytherians. So anyway, overall, I mean, 2 enthusiastic thumbs up for this episode. I think it's great.
Awesome. All right, Jake's final take, everybody, if you're ready for it. Srock Lofton, any final thoughts on this episode?
Oh, he's muted.
I was like, Melissa's going to tell him. She always tells me.
Yeah.
The mute police.
Yeah, good, thanks.
No, I like the computer man interface idea. I think it's something that we see as we move forward. The Neuralink, the VR goggles, all of that is basically indicative of the computer man interface and the merging of those two. So I think they were accurate in this episode from that perspective, scientifically. I mean, sci-fi-scientifically. Also, I thought that one thing was true was that Barclay kept telling the truth. So in the beginning, Barclay said, "I can solve this equation in this much time," and he wasn't lying about that. Again, he took over the computer ship, the computer, and they weren't able to do any of their functions. But he did save the day, and reluctantly, Picard had to thank him for that. So he was truthful in his intentions about accomplishing that mission to save them. So towards the end, when he says, "I'm going to take you someplace and you're going to like it," everybody didn't like it. But then they spent 10 days there with the Cytherians. So he was right about that too. They did like that. They did want that. And so I think that was consistent with Barclay being a character who doesn't have bad intentions. He's, and I think that's consistent. So the host that this alien took over the right host. This person doesn't have those kinds of bad intentions. He was truthful. He was being honest about it, even though he couldn't explain it. And that was my other thing, is that when you have high level intelligence, it's actually more difficult to communicate than easier, which is what you would think, right? You think it's easier to communicate, but how do you communicate the seventh dimension to somebody who works in 3D, right? It's like,
Right.
my brain really won't even accept the complications of it. And I feel like that's what was the thing that was accurately portrayed in this. Barclay couldn't even explain why he had to do those or how he made certain calculations. Because even his, deflector array explanation was way over Riker's head, even though Riker did. And that's like basic stuff. So like, how I'm going to make a wormhole appear out of nowhere and take us 30,000 light years away. That's like, I can't explain that to you guys. You won't even get it. So I just got to do it. You'll like it. Trust me. And he was right. Also, I was thinking they really got to reconstruct that theater. If they're going to be entertaining shows, it only looks like it holds about 8 to 10 people. It's got to be they're not going to be doing a big old performance in that little theater. That's a tiny room. But yeah, I did like this episode. The last thing I'll say is there was a moment there when Barclay turns to Geordi when they're on the little shuttlecraft, and he says, "Hey, thank you for assigning me on this mission." And as soon as he said it, I was like, "Oh, those are the famous last words quotes." That's exactly what you don't say. Because as soon as you say that, I was like, "Oh, he's going to be dead. Something's happening. Something's happening." Don't say thank you. So I really love this episode. Thought it was clever. Joe Manowski shout out again. Definitely like the director's choice with Robert Legato. And this episode was just enough sci-fi, just enough romance, just enough of everything, and also a well-balanced use of the whole cast and crew of the Enterprise. So that's my final take.
Mm.
It is a good final take. I was waiting for somebody saying he told it well. That almost works. I was like, how do we do that? Yeah.
He told it well.
All right. Thanks very much to the Matt, TJ, Greg, Chris McGee, Carrie Schwent, Chris G, Melissa Longo, for myself, Melissa Sirach, and Aaron Eisenberg. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Keep the conversation going. Tell us what you think of Mr. Barclay. Eve messaged. She says she doesn't like Barclay still. She thinks he's a creep. What? Rude. Anyway, let us know. Do you agree with Eve, or do you think Mr. Barclay is a great character? Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you next time. And until then, always remember the 7th rule.